The 80-20 Principle, an extended audiobook. Welcome to Chapter 1, where every story begins and every journey comes alive. Sit back, relax, and let today's audiobook unfold. Before we begin this journey together, I want you to pause for a moment and consider your life right now. Think about your work, your relationships, your daily activities. How much of what you do actually produces the results you want? How much is just noise? If you're like most people, you're working harder than ever but feeling like you're running in place. You're busy from morning until night, yet somehow the truly important things remain undone. You're overwhelmed by choices, drowning in obligations, and exhausted by the sheer complexity of modern life. What if I told you that most of what you're doing doesn't matter? Not in a nihilistic sense, but in a practical, mathematical sense. What if there was a principle, a pattern woven into the fabric of reality itself, that could help you identify the vital few activities that actually create results, and give you permission to ignore everything else? That principle exists. It's called the 80-20 Principle, and over the course of this audiobook, I'm going to show you how to use it to transform every aspect of your life and work. Introduction. The hidden pattern in everything. The discovery that changed everything. Let me take you back to 1897, to the garden of an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto. Pareto was a fascinating character, brilliant, eccentric, and obsessed with patterns. He had made his name studying economic systems, but on this particular day, he was thinking about peas. As he harvested his garden, Pareto noticed something curious. 20% of his pea pods were generating approximately 80% of his total pea yield. The majority of pods produced relatively little. Now, a lesser mind might have dismissed this as a gardening quirk. But Pareto had spent years studying wealth distribution in Italy, and he recognized the pattern immediately. Wasn't wealth distributed the same way? Didn't roughly 20% of the Italian population own about 80% of the land? He began investigating. The more he looked, the more he found the same pattern. 20% of the population consumed 80% of the resources. In his research on other countries, the same imbalance appeared again and again. It wasn't unique to Italy. It wasn't unique to economics. It seemed to be a fundamental pattern of nature and society. But here's the tragedy. Pareto died in 1923, and his discovery remained largely academic. It would take another brilliant mind, decades later, to unlock its practical power. Joseph Juran and the Vital Few. In the 1940s, American engineer Joseph Juran was working on quality control in manufacturing. Companies were struggling with defects, and the prevailing wisdom was that defects had many causes requiring comprehensive solutions. Juran thought differently. He had read Pareto's work and wondered, what if defects also followed the 80-20 pattern? What if most defects came from just a few root causes? He studied the data. Factory after factory, product after product, the pattern held. Roughly 80% of quality problems stemmed from approximately 20% of causes. Juran called this the principle of the vital few and trivial many. The implications were revolutionary. Instead of trying to fix everything, manufacturers could focus on identifying and eliminating the vital few causes that created most problems. Quality soared. Costs plummeted. The quality revolution had begun. But Juran, like Pareto before him, didn't grasp the principle's full potential. He saw it as a quality management tool, not as a universal principle for success in life and business. The principle beyond the numbers. Now, before we go further, I need to address a common misconception. People hear 80-20 and think it's about precise mathematics. They start measuring everything, trying to find exact 80-20 splits. They miss the point entirely. The 80-20 principle isn't about the specific numbers. Sometimes the split is 70-30. Sometimes it's 90-10. Sometimes it's even more extreme, 95-5 or 99-1. I've seen companies where 5% of customers generate 200% of profits, while the remaining 95% collectively lose money. The principle is about imbalance. It's about recognizing that inputs and outputs are not connected in a linear way. A small number of causes are always responsible for a large proportion of effects. A minority of effort produces a majority of results. This pattern appears everywhere, once you know how to look for it. 20% of your clothes get worn 80% of the time. 20% of carpets receive 80% of the wear. 20% of roads carry 80% of traffic. 20% of beer drinkers consume 80% of beer. 20% of criminals commit 80% of crimes. 20% of motorists cause 80% of accidents. 20% of students consume 80% of educational resources. The pattern extends beyond human behavior into nature itself. 20% of tree species make up 80% of forest mass. 20% of earthquakes release 80% of seismic energy. 20% of genes cause 80% of inherited traits. This isn't coincidence. It's a fundamental characteristic of complex systems. Chapter 1. The Mathematics of Imbalance. Why the universe isn't fair. Let's dive deeper into why this pattern exists. Understanding the mathematics will help you apply the principle more powerfully. In a perfectly balanced world, 20% of causes would produce exactly 20% of effects. 20% of customers would generate 20% of revenue. 20% of your time would produce 20% of your results. Cause and effect would be proportional. But we don't live in that world. We live in a world of feedback loops, network effects, and power laws. Consider a simple example. Book sales. In a balanced world, every book would sell roughly the same number of copies. But in reality, a tiny fraction of books become bestsellers, selling millions of copies, while the vast majority sell only a few thousand or even a few hundred. Why? Feedback loops. A book that starts selling well gets featured more prominently in bookstores. It gets reviewed in major publications. People recommend it to friends. These factors drive more sales, which drive more promotion, which drive more sales. Success breeds success. The same dynamic applies in your business. Profitable customers become more profitable over time because you invest more in serving them well. Valuable employees become more valuable because you give them better opportunities. Successful products become more successful because you invest in improving them. The power law distribution. Mathematicians call this pattern a power law distribution, and it's fundamentally different from the normal bell curve distribution we're taught to expect. In a bell curve, most values cluster around the average. If you graph people's heights, you get a bell curve. Most people are near average height, with fewer people at the extremes. But in a power law distribution, there is no meaningful average. A few values are extremely high, while most are extremely low. If you graph wealth distribution, for instance, you don't get a bell curve. You get a power law. A few people have extraordinary wealth, while most have relatively little. Here's why this matters. We've been trained to think in terms of averages and normal distributions. We think the average customer, or average product, or average employee, is representative. But in systems governed by the 80-20 principle, there is no average. There are vital few high-value elements and trivial, many low-value elements. Understanding this changes everything. It means your best customer isn't twice as valuable as your average customer. They might be 10 times or 50 times more valuable. Your best employee isn't slightly better than average. They might produce 5 to 10 times more value. Your best use of time isn't a bit more productive than average. It might be 20 times more effective. The principle in action, a case study. Let me give you a concrete example from a manufacturing company I studied. This mid-sized firm produced 250 different product variations to serve 1,200 customers. When we analyzed the data, here's what we found. The top 20% of customers, 240 customers, generated 78% of revenue. But when we looked at actual profitability, accounting for service costs, complexity, and management time, the top 20% generated 165% of profits. The middle 60% barely broke even. The bottom 20% collectively lost money equal to 65% of profits. In other words, the company's entire profit came from 1/5 of its customers, while 4/5 added complexity and cost without contributing to the bottom line. The product analysis was even more striking. The top 30 products, 12% of the catalog, generated 91% of profits. The next 70 products broke even. The remaining 150 products collectively lost money. Think about that. This company was maintaining 150 product variations, with all the engineering, inventory, marketing, and support costs that entailed, and those products were destroying value. The CEO's first reaction was disbelief. We can't just abandon customers and products. We'd lose revenue. But here's what happened when they took action. They raised prices on unprofitable customers. Many left, some became profitable. Simplified the product line from 250 variations to 50. Invested the freed-up resources in serving their best customers better. In the first year, revenue dropped 15%, but profits increased 40%. Employees were less stressed. Quality improved. Innovation accelerated. By year 3, revenue had recovered and exceeded previous levels, but with a fraction of the complexity. Chapter 2. The Two Paths, 80-20. Analysis and 80-20 thinking. Understanding the distinction. Most people who encounter the 80-20 principle apply it in one way, analysis. They measure their business, identify what's working, and adjust accordingly. This is valuable, but it's only half the story. There are actually two distinct ways to use the principle, and understanding both is critical to unlocking its full power. 80-20. Analysis is the empirical, data-driven approach. You carefully examine your business or life, measure inputs and outputs, and identify the vital few. This requires access to data, time to analyze it, retrospective examination, precision and accuracy. 80-20. Thinking is the philosophical, strategic approach. You assume the imbalance exists and act accordingly, even without perfect data. This requires intuition and judgment, courage to act on incomplete information, forward-looking decisions, wisdom about what matters. Let me illustrate with two different scenarios. Scenario 1. 80-20 analysis. Imagine you run a consulting firm with 50 clients. You decide to do an 80-20 analysis of customer profitability. You start gathering data. For each client, you calculate annual revenue, direct costs, staff time, materials, travel, indirect costs, management time, proposal development, service issues, strategic value, referrals, prestige, learning opportunities. This takes weeks. You have to implement time tracking, allocate overhead, interview account managers, but finally you have the data. The results shock you. Your top 10 clients generate 85% of profits. But client number 11 through 30 contribute only 10% of profits while consuming 40% of management time. The bottom 20 clients actually destroy value. They generate revenue, but the total cost of serving them exceeds what they pay. Armed with this data, you make clear decisions. You invest more in serving your top 10 clients. You raise prices on clients 11 to 30 to improve profitability. You exit relationships with the bottom 20 clients. This is 80-20. Analysis at work, it's powerful, but it's reactive and retrospective. You're optimizing based on past performance. Scenario 2. 80-20 thinking. Now imagine a different situation. You're launching a new business. You don't have existing customers or data to analyze. How can the 80-20 principle help you? This is where 80-20 thinking comes in. Instead of waiting for data, you assume the principle applies and design your business accordingly. You think, in every market, 20% of potential customers will value my service far more than the other 80%. Instead of trying to serve everyone, I'll identify and target only that vital 20%. So you ask, which customer segment will value my offering most highly? Which distribution channel will reach them most efficiently? Which features will matter most to these high-value customers? Which employees will be most effective at serving them? You design everything, pricing, marketing, operations, to attract and delight the vital few, even if it means explicitly not serving the trivial many. For instance, you might price your service at a premium level, Knowing this will exclude 80% of the market but attract exactly the high-value customers who will be most profitable and satisfying to serve. This is 80-20 thinking. You're making strategic choices based on the assumption that not all opportunities, customers, or activities are equal. You're designing for imbalance rather than discovering it. Combining both approaches. The most powerful application combines both approaches. You use 80-20. Thinking to make strategic choices and design your business or life. Then you use 80-20 analysis to verify and refine those choices based on actual results. Here's a personal example of how I've used both approaches in my own career. 80-20. Thinking. Early in my career, I observed that certain types of projects energized me, while others drained me. I theorized that 20% of my potential work would generate 80% of my satisfaction and probably my value contribution. Without waiting for perfect data, I started saying no to opportunities that didn't fit my vital 20%, even when they paid well or seemed prestigious. I focused exclusively on strategic advisory work with entrepreneurial companies, turning down everything else. 80-20. Analysis. After 2 years, I analyzed the results. I calculated revenue, profit, time invested, and subjective satisfaction for every client engagement. The data confirmed my intuition but refined it. 3 specific industry sectors generated 85% of my profit. Clients with revenues between $10 million and $100 million were most profitable. Engagements focused on growth strategy, not cost reduction or operations, yielded the best results. Working directly with founders and CEOs, not hired executives, was most effective. Armed with this analysis, I refined my 80-20 thinking. I narrowed my target market even further, focusing exclusively on founder-led companies in 3 specific industries with revenues in a specific range facing growth challenges. This level of focus seemed crazy to colleagues. You're turning away 95% of potential clients. But that's exactly the point. By serving only my vital 5% brilliantly, I became more successful than I ever could have been trying to serve everyone adequately. Chapter 3. The Time Revolution. The Tyranny of the Urgent. Let's now apply the 80-20 principle to your most precious and irreplaceable resource. Time. Time is the ultimate democracy. Every person, regardless of wealth or power, gets exactly 24 hours per day. Yet some people achieve extraordinary things while others, working just as hard, accomplish relatively little. The difference isn't effort, it's focus. Here's the uncomfortable truth that the 80-20 principle reveals. If 80% of your results come from 20% of your time, that means 80% of your time produces only 20% of your results. Let that sink in. 4/5 of your effort is generating only 1/5 of your value. You could, theoretically, eliminate 80% of your activities and lose only 20% of your results. Or, looking at it from the opposite angle, if you could identify and focus exclusively on your vital 20%, you could potentially increase your results 5-fold without working any harder. The question is, why don't we? Why we waste time? The problem isn't laziness. Most people I know are working harder than ever. The problem is that we've been taught to confuse activity with accomplishment. Busy with productive, urgent with important. Consider a typical workday. You arrive at the office with good intentions. You have important strategic work to do. That proposal that could land a major client. That product innovation that could transform your business. That difficult conversation that could resolve a lingering problem. But before you can start, you check email. 50 new messages. Some require responses. Some contain problems that need solving. Some are just informational, but you read them anyway. Then the interruptions begin. A colleague needs to ask you a quick question. Your boss wants an update. A customer calls with an issue. Each interruption seems legitimate. Each takes only a few minutes. Before you know it, it's lunchtime. After lunch, you have back-to-back meetings. Some are necessary, many aren't, but declining would seem uncooperative. In the meetings, decisions get deferred, discussions meander, and nothing substantial gets accomplished. By late afternoon, you're exhausted. You finally have time for that important strategic work, but you're too mentally drained to do it well. So you do more email, more administrative tasks, more of the trivial many. You go home feeling busy but not productive, tired but not accomplished. And the truly important work remains undone. This pattern isn't unique to you. It's the default mode of modern work life. We respond to whatever demands our attention rather than intentionally choosing what deserves our attention. The 80-20 time analysis. Let's do an experiment. For the next week, I want you to track your time in detail. Every activity, every task, every interruption, write it down. At the end of the week, categorize each activity into one of these groups. Category A. High-value strategic work. Activities that create lasting value. Work that only you can do. Tasks that align with your most important goals. Examples: strategic planning, key client relationships, innovation, difficult decisions. Category B. Necessary but delegable work. Activities that need to be done but could be done by others. Work that's important but not uniquely yours. Examples: routine reports, standard client work, administrative tasks. Category C. Low-value busy work. Activities that create minimal value. Work that probably doesn't need to be done at all. Examples: unnecessary meetings, excessive email checking, minor decisions that don't matter. Category D. Waste. Activities that create no value, pure distraction and time killing. Examples: pointless meetings, office politics, internet browsing. Now calculate the percentages. If you're like most people, you'll find Category A, 10 to 15% of your time. Category B, 25 to 35% of your time. Category C, 40 to 50% of your time. Category D, 10 to 15% of your time. In other words, you're spending only a small fraction of your time on high-value work, while the majority goes to activities that create minimal value. But here's the crucial insight. That 10 to 15% of high-value work is probably generating 80% or more of your actual results. The 80-20. Solution: radical prioritization. The conventional time management approach says, work more efficiently, get better at multitasking, use productivity tools, manage your calendar better. The 80-20 approach is fundamentally different. Don't manage your time better. Manage your activities differently. The goal isn't to do more, it's to do less but better. It's to identify your vital 20% and structure your entire life around protecting and maximizing that time. Here's how. Step 1. Identify your vital 20%. What activities, when you're honest with yourself, create most of your value? This varies by person and role, but some examples. For a CEO, making 3 to 5 critical strategic decisions per year. Recruiting and retaining the top 3 executives. Maintaining relationships with the 5 most important stakeholders. Setting and communicating vision and culture. For a salesperson, building relationships with the top 20% of prospects. Deepening relationships with the top 20% of existing customers. Becoming expert in the specific needs of your highest value market segment. For a professional, the specific deep work that only you can do at your level of expertise. Building relationships with 3 to 5 key mentors or sponsors. Developing the specific skills that make you uniquely valuable. Step 2. Eliminate, delegate, or minimize everything else. Once you've identified your vital 20%, you need to be ruthless about everything else. Eliminate. Many activities don't need to be done at all. They exist out of habit, politics, or the inability to say no. Stop doing them. Stop attending meetings where you add no value and gain no value. Stop generating reports that no one reads or acts on. Stop maintaining relationships that drain energy without providing value. Stop engaging in office politics and unnecessary drama. Delegate. Many activities need to be done but not by you. Find someone else to do them. Hire an assistant to handle administrative work. Train junior employees to take on routine tasks. Use technology to automate repetitive processes. Outsource specialized work to experts. Minimize. Some activities can't be eliminated or delegated, but can be reduced. Batch email processing into 2 30-minute sessions instead of constant checking. Limit meetings to 30 minutes with clear agendas and outcomes. Create templates and systems for routine work. Set boundaries on your availability. Step 3. Protect your vital 20%. This is where most people fail. They identify their priorities but don't protect them from the tyranny of the urgent. You must create barriers around your high-value time. Schedule it first. Put your vital 20% on your calendar before anything else. Treat it as sacred time that cannot be interrupted. Create the right environment. High-value strategic work requires focus. Find or create space where you won't be interrupted. Turn off notifications. Close your door. Leave the building if necessary. Establish clear boundaries. Let people know when you're unavailable and why. Train them not to interrupt except for genuine emergencies. Measure and adjust. Track whether you're actually spending time on your vital 20%. If not, identify what's getting in the way and eliminate it. A real example: the CEO's time revolution. Let me share a specific example. I worked with a CEO who felt overwhelmed and ineffective. She was working 70-hour weeks but felt like she wasn't moving the company forward. We did an 80-20 analysis of her time. The results: 40% of time. Meetings, most of which could have been handled by others. 25% of time, email and communications. 15% of time, crisis management and firefighting. 10% of time, travel. 5% of time, administrative work. 5% of time, strategic thinking and decision-making. Notice the problem? She was spending only 5% of her time on her most important responsibility: setting strategy and making critical decisions. We then identified her vital 20%, making 5 to 7 strategic decisions per year that would define the company's direction. Recruiting and developing the executive team. Building 3 critical external partnerships. Setting culture and communicating vision. We redesigned her life around protecting time for these priorities. Blocked out 3 hours every morning for strategic work. No meetings, no interruptions. Delegated meeting attendance to executives. She attended only critical ones. Hired a chief of staff to handle communications and administration. Implemented a no-crisis policy. Executives had to solve problems themselves unless truly catastrophic. The results after 6 months: working 50 hours per week instead of 70. 40% of time on strategic priorities instead of 5%. Company performance improved dramatically. She felt energized rather than exhausted. This is the power of 80-20 thinking applied to time. It's not about doing more, it's about doing less, but ensuring that less is the vital few activities that actually matter. Chapter 4. Business Transformation. Through 80-20, the Customer Profitability Revolution. Let me tell you about one of the most important and most ignored applications of the 80-20 principle in business: customer profitability. Most companies measure revenue per customer. Far fewer calculate actual profit per customer. And almost none act decisively on what that analysis reveals. Here's what typically happens when companies actually calculate customer profitability. The top 20% of customers generate 80 to 150% of total company profit. Have the lowest cost to serve. Make the fewest demands on customer service. Pay on time. Are loyal and recommend you to others. Buy your most profitable products. Are a pleasure to work with. The middle 60% of customers generate 0 to 20% of profit. Are marginally profitable or break even. Consume reasonable resources. Are neither particularly good nor bad. The bottom 20% of customers generate negative profits. Yes, they lose money. Have high cost to serve. Constantly demand discounts. Create service issues and complaints. Pay late or default. Buy only your least profitable products. Are exhausting to work with. The math often looks like this. Top 20%. generate 150% of profit. Middle 60%, generate 10% of profit. Bottom 20%, lose 60% of profit. Net result, 100% of profit. In other words, your company's entire profit comes from your best customers. A small additional contribution comes from the middle, and your worst customers are actually destroying value, subsidized by your best customers. Why this happens? You might wonder, if bottom-tier customers are unprofitable, why do companies keep serving them? Several reasons. 1. Revenue obsession. Companies focus on top-line growth rather than profit. More revenue feels like success, even if it comes from unprofitable customers. 2. Inadequate cost accounting. Most companies don't accurately calculate the full cost of serving different customers. They see the revenue, they see direct costs, but they miss the management time consumed by demanding customers, the complexity costs of customization and special handling, the opportunity cost of resources diverted from best customers, the stress and turnover caused by difficult customers. 3. Fear of loss. If we fire customers, we'll lose revenue. Yes, you will, but you'll gain profit, simplicity, and focus. 4. Misguided customer service philosophy. The customer is always right is a dangerous maxim. Some customers are wrong for your business. Trying to serve everyone means serving no one excellently. The courage to fire customers. The 80-20 solution is both simple and terrifying. Fire your unprofitable customers. I can feel you resisting this idea. It violates everything you've been taught about business. More customers means more success, right? Wrong. More profitable customers means more success. More unprofitable customers means less success. Let me walk you through how to actually do this. Step 1. Identify who should go. Calculate true profitability for each customer, including direct costs, cost of goods, delivery, etc. Service costs, sales time, support time, customization. Overhead allocation, reasonable estimate based on demands. Opportunity costs, what could you do with those resources instead? Rank customers by profitability. The bottom 10 to 20% are candidates for firing. Step 2. Decide on the method. You have several options for unprofitable customers. Option A, raise prices. Inform them of a significant price increase. Many will leave. Problem solved. Some will pay the higher price, now profitable. Option B, reduce service. Eliminate the special handling that makes them unprofitable. Offer only standard products and services. Some will leave. Some will accept the new terms. Option C, explicitly exit. Have an honest conversation. Explain you're not the right fit for their needs. Recommend a competitor who might serve them better. End the relationship professionally. Step 3. Execute with integrity. Some principles for firing customers. Be honest but kind. Give reasonable notice. Help with transition if possible. Never burn bridges. People's situations change. Learn from why the relationship didn't work. Step 4. Reinvest in best customers. Here's the real opportunity. Take the resources freed up by exiting bad customers and invest them in delighting your best customers. What could you do with an extra 20 to 30% of your team's time and energy? You could provide proactive service before customers even ask. Develop new offerings specifically for your best customers. Build deeper relationships through regular strategic conversations. Solve their problems faster and more completely. Innovate in ways that create more value for them. A case study, the marketing agency. Let me share a real example. A marketing agency I worked with had 85 clients. When we calculated true profitability, top 15 clients, 18%, generated 142% of profit. Middle 45 clients, 53%, generated 8% of profit. Bottom 25 clients, 29%, lost 50% of profit. The bottom 25 clients shared common characteristics: constantly requested rush work, changed direction frequently, challenged every invoice, required excessive creative revisions, paid slowly, were generally unpleasant to work with. These clients consumed 35% of the team's time but generated massive losses. Even worse, they were destroying morale. The best employees were burning out dealing with impossible demands. The agency made a bold decision: fire all 25 bottom-tier clients over a 6-month period. The execution: month 1 to 2, raised prices 50% for bottom tier, offering 60-day notice. Month 3 to 4, for those who accepted the increase, moved to minimum service model. Month 5 to 6, explicitly exited remaining unprofitable relationships. The results: Year 1. Revenue dropped 22%, profit increased 38%. Employee satisfaction soared. Lost only 1 good employee that year versus 5 the previous year. Capacity freed up to serve best clients better and pursue new high-value clients. By year 3, revenue exceeded previous peak. Profit had more than doubled. Team was half the size but more productive and happy. Client base was 60 clients, down from 85, but all profitable. The agency didn't just survive, it thrived by focusing on its vital few customers. Product simplification. The same principle applies to products. Most companies discover that 20% of products generate 80% of revenue. 20% of products generate 150% of profit. 80% of products create complexity without commensurate returns. Yet they continue maintaining full product catalogs because they fear losing revenue or can't admit that past product launches failed. Every product you maintain creates costs: engineering and development resources, manufacturing complexity, inventory costs, marketing and sales effort, distribution and logistics, customer support and training. If a product isn't in your vital 20%, it's probably destroying value. The simplification process: calculate true product profitability, including all overhead and complexity costs. Identify candidates for elimination, bottom 20 to 40%. Phase out strategically. Stop actively marketing low-value products. Raise prices to compensate for complexity. Set sunset dates for discontinuation. Migrate customers to better alternatives. Invest freed resources in winners. Improve your best products. Develop new offerings for your best customers. Take market share in your most profitable niches. The simplicity dividend. When you eliminate unprofitable customers and products, something magical happens: simplicity. With fewer product variations, your operations become more efficient. With fewer difficult customers, your team becomes more engaged. With less complexity, you can move faster and innovate more easily. I call this the simplicity dividend, the compounding benefits of focus. Operational efficiency. Simpler processes, fewer errors, lower costs. Employee engagement. People can focus on meaningful work with good customers. Innovation. Resources available for improving winners rather than maintaining losers. Strategic clarity. Everyone understands priorities. Customer satisfaction. Best customers receive extraordinary service. Profit growth. Revenue may drop initially, but profit soars. This is the essence of 80-20 business strategy. Identify the vital few customers and products that create most of your value, exit or minimize everything else, and reinvest resources in your winners. It requires courage because it means intentionally becoming smaller in customer count, product count, to become better and more profitable. It means saying no to revenue in pursuit of profit. It means focus over diversification. But for those with the courage to embrace it, the results are transformative. Thank you for spending this moment with Chapter 1. Until we meet again, may this story stay with you long after the final word.